Welcome, everyone. Today, we're focusing on strengthening our systems for data collection and progress monitoring within the IEP process. Our goal is to ensure that every decision we make for students is grounded in high quality, objective, and meaningful data. Much of the information in the course is based on the self-paced SBIEP process training developed by TEA. By the end of this session, you'll be able to select the right data tools, plan consistent collection routines, analyze progress, and communicate clearly with families, all while using district-aligned processes. Before going ahead with the rest of the video, be sure you have printed the required resource materials. The link can be found on the hyperdoc you used to access this video and on this presentation slide. Please pause the video and print the resources if you have not done so already. Let's begin by grounding ourselves in the why. Data collection is not just a compliance task, it's the foundation of instructional decision-making. An intervention without progress monitoring is just an activity. As we look at this slide on the purpose of data collection, notice how it connects instruction, documentation, and communication. Without reliable data, it becomes nearly impossible to determine whether a strategy is working or whether a student is truly making progress. Let's first talk about how progress on IEP goals will be measured and reported. According to IDEA, each child's IEP must contain a description of how the child's progress towards meeting the annual goals will be measured. Data should be measured in objective, not subjective ways. So what do I mean by that? I mean you should use data that can be reported in numbers. For example, assessment information from STAR, MAP, DUA, unit tests, etc., checklists, inventories, rubrics, work samples, instructional program data from Lexia or iReady. The TEA IEP Measurable Annual Goals question and answer document states that IEP progress should be reported in the same manner as the goal and any associated objectives is measured. For example, if the goal or objective states that the child will master a goal 4 out of 5 times, then report progress in that same way. For example, how many times out of 5 the student is able to accomplish the goal or objective. If the goal or objective is written as a percentage, then report progress as a percentage. Let's look at this in a little more detail. Look at the objective versus subjective measures. Pause the video and take a moment to look at the sources of data to decide if they're an objective or a subjective measure. So a behavior observation checklist is an objective measure of progress that could be used to gather data and report progress in an objective way. You can identify a specific behavior that you can see and count, and then make a checklist to record those observations. This would yield a number to measure, monitor, and report. A writing rubric is a great objective way to measure the quality of a behavior or skill, such as writing. You can be specific in the rubric as to what you're looking for, attached to a score or points, which allows a calculation to be able to measure, monitor, and report progress in a number, where otherwise it would be very difficult to do so. An anecdotal report is a source of data, but it's subjective. For the measurement of an IEP goal, it could result in having information that is not allowing a specific calculation of how much progress it represents. This could make collecting data and measuring, monitoring, and reporting progress difficult or impossible. Teacher perception is a method utilizing the teacher's perception that would not be a good method and would not derive a measurement to report progress towards IEP goals. In addition, using teacher perception on a progress towards an IEP goal wouldn't yield the same conclusion if measured by several people, which would make the goal unmeasurable. Student perception. This one is similar to teacher perception. We know as a data source for the PLAF that student input is a valuable source of data, but measuring progress towards IEP goals, perception data, even from a student, is subjective. A unit test is an objective measure that would yield a number to measure, monitor, and report. Finally, MAP, iReady, or Lexia data is an objective measure of a student's skills. We also mentioned that IEP progress should be reported in the same manner as the goal and any associated objectives is measured. When writing goals, consider the student's baseline data and how mastery will be progress monitored. Your baseline data should be collected using the same conditions, behavior, and mastery criteria. For example, if the goal mastery is written by the next annual ARD when provided conditions, Johnny will targeted behavior with 70% accuracy in 8 out of 9 opportunities. Johnny must score at least 70% on the 8 out of 9 opportunities given to master the goal. Progress on this goal should be reported by documenting Johnny's percentage of accuracy for each of the 9 opportunities and indicating how many opportunities met or exceeded 70%. Progress comments should clearly state whether Johnny is demonstrating mastery or has met the goal based on achieving at least 70% in 8 out of 9 opportunities. So an example progress report comment could be, during this reporting period, when provided, and state the conditions, Johnny demonstrated the target skill with the following accuracy across 9 opportunities: 60%, 65%, 65%, 70%, 70%, 75%, 75%, 60%, and 80%. Johnny met or exceeded 70% accuracy in 5 out of the 9 opportunities and is progressing toward the goal. When using Goal Book, you must edit the goal, including the mastery criteria, to fit the student's needs and baseline. Information that's put in parentheses in Goal Book is meant to be edited. So look at the sample goal based on the parentheses we must edit: the date, the conditions, the student's name, and the mastery criteria. Remember that the district expectation is to collect 1 data point per week on academic goals. The suggested goals aren't the only thing we must edit in Goal Book. The suggested impact statement and PLAP information must also be edited based on what's in parentheses and to fit the individual profile of the student. Let's look at another goal. By the next annual ARD, when provided conditions, Johnny will targeted behavior with an average of 65% accuracy across 8 opportunities given each grading period. To report progress on this goal, data must be collected during each of the 8 opportunities within the grading period. For example, document Johnny's percentage of accuracy. At the end of the grading period, calculate the average accuracy across all 8 opportunities. To meet mastery criteria, Johnny must demonstrate an average of at least 65% across the 8 opportunities. So an example progress statement might read, during this grading period, when provided, list the conditions, Johnny demonstrated the target skill with an average of 50% accuracy across 8 opportunities. He's on target to meet the mastery criteria of 65% by the end of the IEP year. So let's go back and look at federal law. We reviewed the first part, which was about including a description of how progress towards meeting annual goals will be measured. IDEA requires that the child's IEP include a description of how the child's progress will be measured and when periodic reports of the progress the child is making toward meeting the annual goals, such as through the use of quarterly or other periodic reports or concurrent with the issuance of report cards, will be provided. Examples could be through the use of quarterly or other periodic reports or concurrent with the issuance of report cards. Although it's common practice to provide IEP progress reports on the same grading cycle that's used for report cards, the reporting of progress is distinct and different from the issuing of grades and report cards and should be determined by the ARD committee on an individual student basis. The ARD committee can consider examples provided by IDEA, but the ultimate decision regarding when progress will be reported is up to the ARD committee to determine and describe in the IEP. For reporting purposes, the ARD committee must decide how we will measure the student's progress. We must report on a student's progress towards mastery of all his or her IEP goals. The ARD committee must note in the student's IEP when or how often the LEA will provide the student's family with periodic reports of the student's progress towards meeting his or her annual goals. One of the resources you printed before you started the video is Measuring and Reporting Progress Activity. Please pause the video and complete the activity. It's very short. The exercise should take you less than 5 minutes to complete. When you're ready, come back and resume the video. Let's review the activity. Data should be measured in objective, not subjective ways. This is true. Notations such as progress being made or continuing are adequate for reporting progress. This is false. It's common practice to provide progress reports with the issuance of report cards, but the ARC committee may determine if a more frequent provision of progress monitor reporting is necessary. This is true. Each child's IEP must contain a description of how progress towards meeting annual goals will be measured. The IEP should be reported in the same manner the goal and associated objectives is measured. Each child's IEP must contain a description of when periodic reports on the progress the child is making toward meeting the annual goals will be provided. The ARC committee must describe how the district will measure the student's progress. LEAs must report a student's progress towards mastery of all or his or her IEP goals. And the ARC committee must note in the IEP when or how often the LEA will provide the student's family with periodic reports of the student's progress towards meeting his or her annual goals. Let's move on and discuss measuring progress towards goal mastery. One barrier that can occur when educators begin to measure and monitor the progress of annual academic and/or functional goals is that you discover that the goal is not actually measurable, even if it has the 4 required parts of time frame, conditions, behavior, and criterion. Let's break that down even more. According to the TEA question and answer document, Measurable Annual Goals, a measurable goal is observable if the condition, behavior, and criterion specified in the goal are quantified. Then the goal will be observable and measurable. A measurable annual goal also indicates what to do to measure mastery of the goal. Keep in mind that a criteria such as 80% in 4 out of 5 trials is detailed, but might not be specific or clear enough. Remember, when including a percentage, a trial does not necessarily make the goal observable or measurable. A measurable goal yields the same conclusion if measured by several people. Would 2 different people understand the goal and measure it the same way? The goal must provide enough detail for multiple people to read and implement in the same way. Otherwise, the data obtained will not accurately reflect the progress made by the student. A measurable annual goal allows a calculation of how much progress it represents. In order to calculate how much progress will be made, the PLAF must provide baseline data. Baseline data should be objective so that it can be measured and observed and measured in the same way over time. The same measurement method must be used when collecting baseline data and developing goals. This is the only way to objectively measure how much progress was made. And a measurable annual goal can be measured without any additional data. Can all goals be implemented as intended without additional information? So what should you do if the student's goals don't meet the guidelines? If the goal doesn't meet the guidelines, the IEP must be amended or revised. In order to know a child's progress towards mastering an annual goal, we have to think about this cycle, starting with measuring. We need to establish a method of measurement and a system of data collection before we can monitor and report progress towards the annual goal mastery. TEA has created a resource document that explores the essential elements for data collection and the progress monitoring towards IEP goals. This document includes questions to ask and the breadth of information that helps guide and support answering the broader question. This format of this document may look familiar to you. TEA has also created an essential elements document for PLAFs and for annual goals. Let's look at the form. On the left, you have the questions to ask. So the first one, is it clear how data will be collected based on the measurability of the annual goals? So to answer that, we have to know, is the criteria in the goal observable? Does the goal indicate what to do to measure mastery of the goal? Does the goal yield the same conclusion if measured by several people? Does the goal allow a calculation of how much progress it represents? Can the goal be measured without additional information? The next question to ask, does the IEP describe the method used to measure a student's progress towards goal mastery? Think about section 6 in same goal. We use the check boxes to show a parent how we're going to measure the student's progress. So does it describe the method of data that's objective and can be reported in numbers rather than words? So observation checklists, rubrics, test scores. The district bank, I believe, has data collection, which is a good one to use. Check any of the ways that you're going to use to collect data for the goal. Does the criteria from the annual goal align to the data collection and the IEP progress report? So is the same criteria stated in the annual goal used to collect data? Can the IEP annual goals progress be reported in the same manner as the goal? Is it clear how frequent the data collection on annual goals should occur? Is data measured frequently and consistently enough that changes to supports and services can occur if needed? The more frequently data is collected, the faster progress can be measured. So, is there a consistent data collection schedule? Is it clear who's going to collect data on the annual goal and monitor and report progress? So is it clear who is collecting data? Does the person identified have the training needed to collect the data? And do they know how to ask for help if they need it? Is it clear who's going to inform the family of progress towards annual goals? And then the final question, is it clear in the student's IEP how often periodic reports on progress the child is making towards meeting annual goals will be provided? So is there information about when we'll provide information to the family? Think about the checkbox in section 6 for each goal where it says concurrent with the issuance of report cards. And then are periodic reports sent to the family in accordance to what's stated in the IEP? Please pause the video and complete the rest of the measuring progress towards goal mastery activity. It's very short. The exercise should take you less than 5 minutes to complete. When you're ready, come back and resume the video. According to the TEA question and answer document, Measurable Annual Goals, a measurable goal is observable. A measurable goal also indicates what to do to measure the mastery of the goal. Keep in mind that a criterion such as 80% in 4 out of 5 trials is detailed, but still might not be specific or clear enough. Remember, including a percentage or a trial does not necessarily make the goal observable or measurable. A measurable goal yields the same conclusion if measured by several people. Would 2 different people understand the goal and measure it the same way? The goal must provide enough detail for multiple people to read and implement it in the same way. Otherwise, the data obtained will not accurately reflect the progress made by the student. A measurable goal allows a calculation of how much progress it represents. The PLAF must provide baseline data. Baseline data should be objective so that it can be observed and measured the same way over time. The same measurement should be used when collecting baseline data and developing goals. Finally, a measurable annual goal can be measured without additional information. Let's review the progress of data collection, including measuring versus monitoring. Look at this annual academic goal. By the next annual ARD, after reading an instructional level literary text with teacher-selected supports, for example, graphic organizers, sentence starters, or guiding questions, and given 5 questions, either multiple choice or short answer, about key details from the text, Christy will identify the key details with 80% accuracy in 8 out of 9 trials. So is it clear how data will be collected based on the measurability of the annual goal? The goal is observable. It indicates that to measure mastery, she must average 80% on the 5 multiple choice or short answer questions given during each trial. This would yield the same conclusion if measured by multiple people, can be measured without additional information, and allows a calculation of how much progress it represents. The teacher can take the results of the 5 questions in each trial, and average those for each IEP reporting period. With the conditions of the goal that Christy has in place for this annual goal, the teacher would also want to record the instructional level of the text given and the teacher-selected support that was provided to not only document that those conditions were provided, but also for the data to count towards measuring progress. What objective data are we using to measure progress? In this case, 8 times each 9 weeks, the student's given 5 questions about key details from the text and must answer with 80% accuracy. We can use these trials as part of our data collection to measure progress. Does the criteria from the annual goal align with data collection in the IEP progress report? Yes, the data collection measurement allows me to report at each specified reporting period the percentage of correctly answered questions regarding key details. Here's an example of a functional goal. By the next annual ARD, given one prompt to begin working and a written assignment checklist, Christy will complete 80% of given assignments at a passing level over 10 consecutive days. We can see that it's observable. It has all 4 parts, but in addition to that, it's clear what you need to see and count. It also indicates what to do to measure mastery of the goal, could yield the same conclusions if measured by several people, allows a calculation of how much progress it represents, and can be measured without additional information. This goal would, however, require a data sheet to be able to measure that mastery. Best practice indicates that IEP progress should be reported in the same manner as the goal and associated objectives is measured. For this goal, a data collection form is needed. The goal is not specific to one subject, so you'll need to compile the data across subjects, put in date order, and determine what percentage of assignments she completed at a passing level over X number of days. In this example, Christy is given assignments at a passing level over 3 consecutive days. So let's talk about measure versus monitor. We tend to use the terms data collection and progress monitoring interchangeably, but the intent behind them is actually different. When measuring annual goals, you should identify how often the data will be collected. Based on the annual goal, do you need to collect data daily, multiple times per week, biweekly, or weekly? Maintaining a consistent data collection system schedule is important too. You want to measure consistently and frequently enough that database changes to services and support can occur. Data collection gives us the information we need to progress monitor. Progress monitoring is used to assess a student's progress on his or her goals and evaluate the effectiveness of instruction. If a student's not making progress based on the services and supports in the IEP, we must determine a course of action. The more frequently we collect data, the more timely that new course of action can occur. This leads to greater student success. We're often asked how often data collection should occur. As mentioned on the previous slide, you want to measure consistently and frequently enough that database changes to services and supports can occur. The more frequently that data is collected, the sooner we can determine the effectiveness of our instruction. If data is collected daily, effectiveness can also often be determined within 2 weeks. If it's collected twice per week, effectiveness may be determined within 1 month. If data is collected weekly, effectiveness can be determined within 3 months. The district expectation is to collect at least 1 data point per week for academic goals. The recommended frequency for functional and behavioral goals is daily. This allows us to monitor progress for a set amount of time before revising our instruction. Another consideration is to identify who will collect the data on the annual goals and short-term objectives or benchmarks. Some examples include a general education teacher or teachers, a special education teacher, either the case manager or the SPED staff providing the support, or a paraprofessional. Once identified, we must ensure that the individual or individuals have the appropriate training needed in order to collect the data. The person collecting the data may be the same or different than the person monitoring for progress. Be sure each role has been identified. It's also important that any individuals involved with implementing and collecting data on the annual goals know who to go to for questions about the goals. If you have questions about this, there are staff members on your campus and in the special education department who you can reach out to for help. The final consideration when measuring, monitor, and reporting progress toward mastery of annual goals is to identify where the data will be collected. This could be in a setting, so during math class or during resource time, or during a context, such as during reading instruction in the gen ed classroom. IEPs are reviewed at least annually. However, the IEP can be revised more frequently as appropriate. The IDEA requires that the ARD committee revise the IEP as appropriate to address a lack of expected progress towards annual goals. Frequent data collection and progress monitoring towards annual goals are critical to know when the ARD committee needs to revise the IEP due to a lack of expected progress. With strong progress monitoring, teachers can typically calculate the student's rate of progress on goals after 6 to 8 data points. Adjustment to the IEP may be needed if the student is not on track toward goal mastery. Another way to consider when the ARD committee may need to revise the IEP is when there's a lack of progress towards the goal at the end of the grading period. For example, if after the grading period with data collection, the student has made limited or no progress and is off track towards meeting the goal, the ARD committee should reconvene to discuss options. So what else must we collect data on other than goals and objectives? Progress monitoring is more than just progress on goals. We also must collect data and monitor a student's accommodations and modifications. Are they being used independently, routinely, and effectively? We need data to justify their use. This is what we mean when we refer to the with and without data for the PLAF. For example, with a graphic organizer and text-to-speech of questions and answer choices, Christy's able to answer questions about the beginning, middle, and end of a narrative text with 60% accuracy. Without these accommodations, her accuracy on these types of questions is 35%. We also must keep a daily record of our provision of services. We'll discuss this more a little later in the presentation. Finally, we must collect data on a student's progress in the grade level standards, or the TEKS. As I mentioned earlier, we must collect data consistently and frequently enough that database changes to services and supports can occur. The more frequently data is collected, the sooner we can determine the effectiveness of our instruction. The district has set the following expectations for data collection. On a daily basis, teachers providing co-teach, instructional facilitation, steps, and elementary resource must keep a log of services provided. Data on behavior goals should also be collected daily. On a weekly basis, we should collect at least one data point on goals and objectives and accommodations. Remember, we're collecting data in the same manner in which the goal is written. It's not appropriate to use an overall class grade or a total DEA score as a data point since multiple TEKS are covered. Each quarter, the progress report must be shared with the parents, unless the ARD committee determined a different schedule for reporting progress. And then at the annual ARD meeting, the progress report is closed out and shared with the parent. The data from the progress report is used to provide data-based information on a student's strengths and needs. Each campus must select a system to store data for goals and objectives, accommodations, and services and supports. Your campus will decide if progress monitoring forms will be kept by case managers, administrators at elementary, or turned into your campus coordinators at middle and high school, or clerks at high school. Whichever system your campus chooses, forms need to be accessible upon request, even in subsequent school years. TEA can go back 7 years for this information. That's why we say, in God we trust, all others bring data. When it comes time to prep for an annual ARD, it's helpful to have this information in your physical or digital data collection binder to aid in writing the annual IEP. If this information is added on an ongoing basis, it significantly reduces the time it takes to craft a student's PLAF. Notice that the teacher input and observation is only one source of data for the PLAF. A good PLAF must contain multiple sources of data over a variety of settings. The phrase, "it is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data," is a famous quote attributed to Sherlock Holmes. It means that it's a major error to form theories without first collecting all the necessary evidence as doing so can lead to twisting facts to fit a preconceived notion instead of using facts to form a correct theory. The same holds true in making decisions about the services and supports provided to certain students served in special education. The ARD committee must base the IEP decisions made in the ARD meeting on data that's included in the PLAF. It's the district expectation that every teacher have either a physical or digital data collection system for their students that can be accessed whenever needed. So, where can teachers find resources to use in their system? Data collection sheets for accommodations and goals can be printed from the student's IEP and same goal. Goalbook has progress monitoring assessments and data collection sheets for goals. Examples of these and other data collection resources can be found on a link on the hyperdoc or on this slide. Also linked is a progress monitoring guidance document. It provides data collection resources based on instructional program. Google Forms can be created for digital data collection systems. Service log examples for elementary, middle, and high school can be found using the link on the hyperdoc or on this slide. If you're struggling to find a data collection system that works for you, please reach out to your program coordinator. Finally, a note about the comments section of the progress report. Comments should communicate specific information about progress in a way that parents can understand. They should match the conditions, behavior, and criterion of the goal, but be aware of using acronyms or school jargon that's unfamiliar to parents. The comments section should be specific and should include what a student can do right now and how well they're able to do it. Thank you for your time and attention. This concludes our self-paced course. I hope you've gained some valuable information on strengthening your system for data collection and progress monitoring within the IEP process to ensure that every decision made for students is grounded in high quality, objective, and meaningful data. Please use the QR or use the link to provide feedback on this course. Your input helps us create courses that meet your needs.